Mr. Prowse. Oops. There we go. Got a little
There.
light on the subject here. How are
I,
you?
I popped in early and then I was talking to myself, so I
Cool. Yeah, it sets a start recording automatically.
yeah, it does. Well, because I was the first one, I guess, that popped in. So
Yeah, I think actually Andy Weevil popped in before you. And it's not a problem. So I got a notice. I'm like, your coffee Klatsch has been recorded. I'm like, it has? Hey, Scott.
and
how are
maybe people are infiltrating your room and just getting some free Zoom time out of it. So
you?
Morning, George. Good morning, Dave.
morning,
Hey, Steve.
everybody.
And guys, this is the last one we're going to do on Zoom. We're moving this into the community. So because it has their meeting capability has gotten where we want it. So we're gonna let's try that next week. And I'll send out an email and post it in the community and make sure everybody's very clear.
What, like through Circle?
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, they have a new courses module that we're going to use for many but not all of our classes, and so we use them for our internal, for things that are non-marketing, right? And then when non-members, when the world wants to come in, then we may use Zoom, but yeah. Scott, you have a new background there.
Yeah, I thought I'd brag a little bit about the Continental Divide. So, George, when I drive up from my my office down in Wheat Ridge, that's the view every time. And needless to say, I never get tired of it.
Yeah, you're killing me. You know that I lived out there for a long time ago. I lived out there for a while. I lived in up Coal Creek Canyon. So
Oh, you did? Okay.
yeah.
Yeah, and your son is coming here, so.
Yes, he is. So you'll be.
Scott, are you in
Penny,
Denver?
I'm in a town, David, called Evergreen, which is about 25 miles outside of downtown.
Okay.
25 miles in the right direction.
Yeah, up in the foothills at 700 to 800 feet. So
Yeah.
Nice. So I did a trip down to Denver in 2019 and I loved it. It was it actually, because I lived out in Calgary about a decade earlier, which so I kind of found that the weather and the layout of Denver was kind of like a bigger version of Calgary.
Yeah, I love Calgary. Absolutely.
yeah, I've heard that. Yeah.
Yeah. Calgary and Edmonton.
Just go in summer though.
Yeah, no kidding.
Some good hockey rivalry going on right now.
Yeah, no, for sure. Yeah, I know it was a fun town. I lived there for about 7 years, and it's interesting too because you move to different parts of the country, different mindsets, and just kind of like I mean, I'm here in the Toronto area, so it's kind of like it's kind of like the northeast of of the U.S. Just kind of like everybody's just kind of like that's the center of the universe, and then you go somewhere else and you realize like nobody really cares about what's going on back in Toronto. It's just
Yeah,
Toronto
certainly is a beautiful city.
It is, but it's funny. It's kind of it's become the almost the New York City of Canada, right?
Oh, is that right?
Huge, yeah, huge city, and the de facto capital. Of Canada,
Well, everybody thinks it's the capital of Canada, but it's Ottawa.
It's Ottawa, yep. Which by the way is a fantastic town. If anybody says, hey, you've got,
Well, George, have you spent any time in Montreal?
I have.
Because you're closer to Montreal than.
Yeah, I can make it in 2.5. If the border crossing is clear.
Well, the funny part is they throughout most of the history of Canada, Montreal was the number one city, right? And it was just until they started getting into the whole separations issue in the 70s that all the capital kind of started leaving Quebec and moved to Toronto, because Toronto was always kind of second fiddle. Yeah. And so that's kind of how that evolved. And today Montreal there's still lots of old money there, like there's still lots of head offices, but it's still a very nice place to go visit in summer, that's for sure.
Absolutely.
Fun festivals.
And Air Canada gets you in there. Yeah, I can't recommend that city enough. You know, it's kind of it's halfway between Toronto and Quebec in feel. And the old part of Montreal is fantastic. The restaurants are great, whatever.
Yeah, it's very European kind of in feel.
It is. You know, as I love to joke, you know, it feels like you're in a foreign country.
Yeah. Well,
Yankees,
and if you talk to the right
Yankees
French
are
person,
actually,
they'll tell you that it is a separate country.
yeah, like the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, right, Jeff?
Yeah.
The UP Republic.
Yeah.
Well, guys, there's a lot going on. Clarity is on the commercial server. It is at growth-capacity.com. And yeah, I'm excited. So I'm gonna put together some training videos and we'll start taking it out around the track. And if anybody wants to take a peek at it, I'm happy to do that. I'll do some more formal events, but I'm excited, and the engineers are already well down the path to creating the lifestyle and equity planning module, and that will be done in March. So as quickly as we can do it right. So that'll be followed. I think I've said this publicly. That'll be followed by the senior leadership alignment module. That's not a heavy lift. That's the ability to use Clarity with separately with the senior leadership team and create a report that can then power a workshop. And all the while, you know, the deep water, the deep analysis being created in the background, and that should see the light of day in May. So we're on track. And you know, I was sharing with Barry yesterday, and Barry was a little shocked. You know, of over 50,000 uses of core value, there are only about 2,500 deep dive analysis. Now, that 50,000, that sounds, but like a lot of data, you've got to normalize it, right? So that 50,000 includes monsters like not Morgan Stanley, Mass Mutual, and American City Business Journals and others doing lots of use of Discover. So, you know, that kind of skews the number, but
Hey, George, what was that number again on the deep dive?
2,500.
2,500.
Yeah.
Wow.
So you know, now I would say that for the average advisor, and I'm, you know, like you guys, I no longer have access. But my professional opinion is that the average person was about 10 to 1, 10 initial analyses to 1 deep analysis, and not because they had a 10 to 1 conversion rate. They converted at a very high rate, and you guys know this, right? You convert at a very high rate, but not always into the deep analysis. So you know, calling conversion into the deep analysis the only true conversion is erroneous. You know, the conversion is into an engagement, no matter what that engagement is, right? The goal is to have you guys winning and executing successful engagements, and Clarity's a much better tool. Put another way, I've done 2 demos and have 2 people who said, I'll buy. So that's I know that trend won't hold, but that was heartening. Hey, Andy, how are you, man?
Great, George. Thank you. Hi, everybody.
Morning, Andy.
Morning.
What would you guys like to talk about this morning? What's on everyone's mind?
Hey, I did, George, just before getting on here, I saw an interesting article from the American Business Journal that let me get the right firm. I think it was Cushman Wakeman.
Okay.
They are saying that by the end of this decade, $1.4 billion in office space will be vacant. I mean, 1.4 billion square feet, excuse me, of office space will be vacant. And there's a significant push on either turning that into industrial And then they're finding that a lot of older buildings that aren't sustainable in today's environmental concerns never won't even have an option on those, primarily for trying to convert to residential, because that's been a push as well.
Yeah,
So it's going to be really interesting over this next decade.
that is interesting. I got to tell you, the building I'm in right now would make fantastic condos,
Yeah.
you know? So, yeah.
You know,
But-
just building on that, Scott, you know, an even more interesting thing is that if you look forward to in the next 5 years, there will be a whole slew of people who will not be working in their same jobs as they are now, because of the mega trends that are hitting us. And my point is, are business owners prepared for it? And are we as advisors understanding of these trends enough to be able to sound a warning and the risk management to business owners? And obviously certain industries will be impacted more than others, but there's going to be a whole skills crisis that will arise over this next 5 years or so.
Well, Andy,
Yeah, Andy, in addition to that, or as part of that, I just had a client that a couple of months ago, I helped them understand that they weren't even competitive. They're in the engineering field, but they weren't competitive in wages. So, we did some good research. The Colorado Department of Labor's got an excellent site to be able to, calibrate wage ranges, and we made a significant increase across the board on those positions that were necessary, because the pilfering, especially in engineering, because that's an aging workforce.
Yes.
Man, young, committed engineers are a hot commodity.
Yes, they are. There's a whole middle level of the workforce is going to go. Okay, yes, new opportunities, new jobs. But when companies, and they very rarely look at workforce planning anyway, but if they're not now, it will become a critical issue for them in the next few years.
Yes.
And I think we as advisors need to be just sounding some of the, not being alarmist, but just talking through about pivoting and about looking and, thinking about being agile and looking at the workforce and doing their own sort of homework on it.
well, Andy, I read a recent article. I think it was in McKinsey when I was laying beside the pool over the last couple of weeks.
Yes, turn the screws. Come on.
that talked about the automation, specifically about AI. I think we talked about this at our at a recent coffee Klatsch, but it's what dawned on me in reading this was our smaller companies going to be able to afford to automate their business so that they can replace people. And what is the whole economics behind it? It just dawned on me how interesting that might be.
But it's the tip, Barry. Automation, robotics, metaverse. We're going to hit with a storm of things heading our way, let alone the current economic and crisis in Ukraine and stuff, etc. And I just don't. I think it's a bit of a black hole with business owners in this respect.
That's fascinating. That's fascinating, guys.
I did a project with the Abu Dhabi government about a year ago now, where we were looking at these mega trends and the impact on the workforce across 10 sectors for the workforce of Abu Dhabi. And one of the things that I was focused on and was asked to do was to look at the leadership skills required of the workforce up to around 2030. And I identified a number of skills and competencies. The usual ones are there. I might post it into Circle for you. But what became very clear is that the thinking and critical analysis aspects now of decision making and problem solving are going to be even more required in the future. and in terms of leadership. So all those thinking, cognitive skills that robotics, automation, AI can't handle are going to be in high demand in that leadership space.
That's fascinating. You know, I was just in a conversation with a young man who's taking a gap year from college, what we call in the States a gap year, meaning he's not going straight to university. And his conception of university and mine are very different. So Andy, does that argue in favor of, and we don't have to go down this rabbit hole, but that seems to argue in favor of the power of a liberal arts education, the power of philosophy.
let's okay, I'm not going down the rabbit hole, I promise you, but let's go broader. What was the idea behind doing this sort of work for the Abu Dhabi government? Of course, it was to backfill, to look at what are the educational requirements, what are the university requirements and school requirements, and are our universities and schools understanding this to change the curriculum to produce the type of people who can become employable?
Fascinating. And Andy, just maybe we can use this to wrap up this topic or this rabbit hole, but what were the top areas of study that they thought would be the most important?
Depended on the industry, but in the leadership side, it was about transformational leadership, having those skills to encourage, inspire, enable, values-based leadership, to appeal to the younger Gen X generations and Gen Z generation, etc. And the high the thinking skills, the cognitive elements, and this ability to problem solve and make decisions. And of course, another big area was to be what we call it digital literacy.
Yeah. To
have digital literacy skills. And one other, and you won't be surprised, is the DE&I. Although in the Gulf countries, they got some catching up to do in that respect.
That's fascinating. You know, if you guys want to know what an incredible culture and organization thinks of a liberal arts education, I would invite you to go and look at the bios of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. It is fascinating. The military puts their top brass, they get them doctorates in religion and philosophy and in topics that you would never think. But you have a conversation with a General Mattis and their ilk, and those women and men are deep thinkers. Anyway.
Yeah, and just one last point, you make that, but because I'm I'm an ex-military guy, and there is no better establishment who really understands and gets a grip of learning and development. But the staff colleges in both the US Air Force, I'm talking Air Force now because that's my background, US Air Force and our Air Force, I mean, in terms of that liberal education, second to none. And you just would not think, as you say, that would be applied to a military 4-star or 3-star, you know.
Yep. Fascinating.
Yeah.
The future of work, man. Well, and this and to bring it close to home, when we think in terms of, and Jeff, I know we've just discussed this in detail down in Charleston, Barry as well. The people productive and loyal and engaged workforce, and then separately the ability to attract and hire, which goes into both of those, have compensation issues associated with them. To your point, Scott, what do our business owners need to be looking when they're looking out the windshield forward? What do they need to be doing with their businesses now so that 10 years from now they have an engaged workforce? They're able to find the right people and make them productive quickly and get them engaged. That's the thing. Components of strategic culture. He said, throwing out the growth drive objectives. But this is a fascinating area.
And I was reading another article, and those who are more versed in PE than me, the article was making the point, it's where PE and M&A houses, they do not focus enough on this area in due diligence. And that's where they come and stop, the people side and culture. Those two things came out loud and clear. People and culture get missed in the due diligence.
Yeah. Not if we beat our gong loud enough.
But I think that's
Well-
typical of, but I think that's so typical of an M&A group that all they got is these young M&A graduates that crank numbers, grind numbers, do industry statistics, et cetera, and come back with numbers interpretation. But I found when I was working as a subcontractor for some of these firms, as soon as I went in and did the deep dive, that was so much more insightful as to the probable success of a transaction, because it started to highlight labor, people, and planning
Yeah.
that is not reflective in accounting and financial data.
Yeah, if there was a metric, I'm sure I'm not an M&A guy, but we know that they're tracking employee turnover, right? But then how do we demystify? We need to demystify what it takes to have low employee turnover, coupled with a business that's outperforming on margin, right? So
Hey, George.
yeah, Jeff.
Just to your point, you had mentioned how important it is for businesses to look out, 5 or even 10 years and to be prepared, with workforce planning, right? Okay, so if they don't, that's a risk, right?
Yeah.
But actually, there's a double risk, because we've got these black swan events like COVID, like the war, that are additional risk. So actually, business owners who aren't doing that are incurring double risk.
Yeah.
Right at this time. So it is a huge need out there, and I can't say enough about it. So I'm glad we're throwing this topic around.
Yeah, absolutely. I hadn't even thought in terms of black swan events. I mean, we take, there's been an increasing chatter in the community about, what does a business need to look like in a recession? How do we help our clients become resilient? How do we help them, and what does a client need to look like if they're going to be transaction ready in the next 2 years or so? What does that look like? Because you got to smell like roses. And then you throw in, not just a recession, but black swan events. And there will be more. There always are, unfortunately.
Well, I saw a statistic recently.
Thanks, Jim.
I assume it was valid, but 50% of exits are unplanned. So setting black swan events aside, what about a divorce, an illness, key employees leaving, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I guess Boy Scouts went out of vogue, but always be prepared.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a book I can recommend on people and M&A. It was written by a friend of mine, Jennifer Fondervay, Fondray. It's called Now What? And she talks about the importance of understanding the culture and the people before the transaction and after the transaction. And she experienced it through two companies that she worked for, but that did a number of transactions and ignored the people.
Yeah.
And it really changed the culture of the firm, of the company. So I wanted to just throw that out there.
That's, yeah.
Yeah, she's a very interesting individual.
Barry, could you throw that book into the books section of Circle, please? Just, her name and the title.
If I can figure out how to do it, George, I'd be more than happy to.
So when you think about what we've just been talking about and bring it back down to us as advisors and how we make that come alive, in the strategy piece, it's about that SWT analysis, as I call it, that strengths, weaknesses, and trends, not SWOT. Strengths, weaknesses, and trends is a strategic look at that higher level, that strategic thinking. And I consider SWOT to be the tactical, internal thinking of the business. And so strengths are, what strengths do we have that we can be the best or become the best? and that's tied to differentiators. And then weaknesses are about what weaknesses do we have that we don't necessarily, we understand the weaknesses, but don't necessarily strategically want to focus on them because we've got a bigger feast to eat in the strengths. And then, of course, you've got those strategic trends. There are various tools to do that, which will begin to highlight, if we take our owners through this, these sorts of considerations.
That was it's funny. I added strengths to the clarity level 1 analysis, Andy, as in sort of a game time. Hey, you know, we're talking about growth killers and deal killers. Why don't we give them credit where credit's due? And there's going to be one more module. In fact, here, I'll share my screen and show you what I'm talking about here. Boom. So I was in here this morning. I'm gonna decouple some of these. There we go. And we'll make these partly true. Simply because it skews the, all right, next. So you see that I'm changing this report as we're you know, on the fly. So down here, what are your current best practices? What's in place that we should give you credit for? What can we leverage going forward? And for this business, if we go back to the survey, effective senior leadership, strategic culture, and large market size. And those are, here's effective senior leadership. You know, if you have top marks in one of these areas, then let's call it out. And then I'm adding down the road, I'm going to add low-hanging fruit here. Well, we'll give it a better name than low-hanging fruit, but anything that on the survey is marked as partly true in the first 2 dimensions. Let's say, hey, you know, if we work on these, you might, you know, it's going to get you some early wins. But yeah, Andy, to your point, here are the best practices that are in place that we should leverage, you know, recognize and leverage as we're planning the redesign of the business so that it can meet the CEO's goal, whatever that goal is. And for this CEO, the goal is grow revenues. Number 1 goal, grow revenues. So
George, can you stay with the report and come down a bit to the now it might just be me. Keep coming down to the range of business value. It might just be me, but I'm still having trouble reading this range of business value. I got this tendency to look vertically and horizontally, and you know, and like a 2x2 matrix, and I just can't quite grasp where we've got the lowest multiple and the highest multiple from that range.
So Andy, that is a great point. And you know, here's transparency at work, guys. There's too much explaining. I mean, I can defend this, but there's too much explaining. So what the engineers are doing right now is we are recasting this so that all 9 blocks are completed. And we share the scores. And then by the end of the month, we'll actually have a little yellow dot. Your business is about here. So we can say, okay, so does that hold together? I could show you what it looks like. Yeah, right here. This chart. We're going to go with this chart, Andy, because there's just too much explaining in the current. And that, you know, with the scores, the range of scores. So if you imagine this chart, now we can still have fantastic conversations as with our Rev 1, but there will be a Rev 2 here within a very short period. Now, if you're having trouble, here's the concept. We have an X-axis and a Y-axis. So if we look at a growth capacity of 60 and a value capacity of 20, then 60 is going to be, you know, sort of in here in this vertical, if we're looking at the growth capacity, and then we add value capacity at 20, we're somewhere in this area. So, you know, somewhere between 3.6 and 6, but not, you know, 3.6-ish, but that's the conversation. Your business is not worth the $10 million that it would be worth if it had high strategic capacity. Okay. Your business, that money just simply can't be transferred. It can't be monetized. It exists, but the value can't be monetized by you because of the risks inherent in the business. And those risks are that let's go through them. Well, in fact, we can go through it on the report. And here are your risks. If we just, the ones that have the worst scores, you don't have a strategic plan. You don't understand your capacity to execute a strategic plan. You're not growing compared to the market, or you're not tracking. You don't know where you are. And then there are deal killers, and there are a lot of deal killers here because I was actually this morning, you'll see that they're all at zero. So they're getting a little value capacity from their performance in dimensions 1 and 2, but I zeroed them out in dimension 3 and going down a little.
So here's my aha moment. And what's confused me. Look at the top of the chart, the value at low multiple and the value at high multiple.
Yes.
I was trying to match both of those figures to the chart and thinking where I could see where the high multiple came from, but the low one I wasn't quite sure, and how that knowing that the growth capacity was low.
Yeah.
Down at 3.333 million, 3.5 million. So I was thinking, why isn't that low multiple 3.5 million to 10 million?
Yeah, that's a great question, Andy. So if we, at the low end of the range of multiples for this industry, what are we working with here? We have 2 million of EBITDA. It's a manufacturing company, so we're calculating the multiple applies to EBITDA. So here would be your 3 times EBITDA and your 6 times, or you know what? We can also do this. So when I was doing a demo yesterday, it was with an M&A professional, and he said, well, change the, I'll just delete that and click next, and that'll apply to default. So you'll notice that went up to 6x. You can change the multiples, guys. So he asked, what if I have a $120 million business? And I said, well, then that the multiples, there's going to be a size premium, and you're in the business, right? You're an M&A advisor. What the top is. So you want to put an 8x multiple in there, put it in. This needs to power your conversation. Okay. So at 3 times earnings, we're getting 6 million. At 6 times earnings, we're getting 12. Okay. That's on growth capacity. The problem is this business has a very low value capacity. So, we're going to be down here. Okay, we have to not just look at the growth, we have to look at the value capacity, the ability to get through due diligence. And frankly, there are enough deal killers. These things have to be fixed if we're going to be transaction ready. What a great term that someone shared with me yesterday, transaction ready. So,
so forgive me, George, go back again.
Please.
I haven't got that. So what's the 3.5? That's the low growth capacity.
Yes.
Low, so where's that featuring?
So here, that's featuring. So we're a 60 on our growth and a 20. So what we really need to be talking about is 60 and 20. And at 60, we're not in this zone. We're somewhere in the middle, right? We're above 40 and below 85. But the 20 puts us over here. And the reason that this is an NA is because you won't be able to go to market, So we're kind of in a fire sale. Not only are you not getting 6 million, you're going to be sold for some amount of money, but this isn't even one-time EBITDA, right?
Okay.
So that's the thinking, and that's why we're going to evolve the chart, because there's too much explaining that needs to go on. It's much easier if we say, okay, you're what do we say, a 60-20? All right, so you're here, you're somewhere here.
Well, George, nothing will get their attention more than a big fat 0.
Well, that's what we need to communicate. So this will always be 0. You'll have your high end of your range of multiples here, low end, and then the calculated values are here. So if you have, you've got your act together in every respect in the third dimension, but you don't have anything going on. The question becomes, is this transaction possible? And you're going to have deal killers listed, you're going to have deal killers this long and growth killers this long. And, that's the conversation to have with a business owner. There are things in your business that are not up to best in class. Who used the term the other day? Was it you, Joe Lorenz? Are you still on the call? The must-have company. This is a must-have.
I am, George.
Hey, Joe. So this is a must-have company. This is a, no, thank you. I don't even
But
want
nobody
your
wants
job.
it.
Yeah, I don't even want your, by the way, people buy businesses so they can have a job. I don't even want your job because this thing isn't going to grow. It's going to be a pain in the butt. It has what's crazy. Barry knows what I'm talking about. You can have a business that is that the scores are a complete mess, but the business is profitable, right? Remember, this is a business that has, it looks like the same numbers, right? This is a business with $2 million of EBITDA, but it's a bug show internally. Not to mention in a case that jumps to mind, the family is at each other's throats. There's divorce. There's kids with, there are kids with some bad habits. There's all sorts of things going on.
It's a lifestyle business.
It's a lifestyle business. And then we can ask, we should be asking our client, well, given what we know about your business, why would someone, the two questions are, why would someone buy your business? And importantly, why wouldn't they? Because the why wouldn't they's are what's killing it. So Andy, did I answer your question?
Yes, you did. Yeah, I have a clearer understanding. I need to play around with it a bit, but
Yep.
certainly
Well,
it's clearer now. Thank you. And I think the move to the second iteration, I think, is better. Yes.
Yeah, and the guys are on it right now. So it'll appear as quickly as we can do it right, because doesn't matter.
Just
Okay.
an observation.
Please.
You might think that about that green color, you're recognizing that males tend to have some red-green color blind, and that all turns gray. You might want to think if there should be a different color there. I know green signifies growth, value, dollars, etc. But maybe you put a dollar sign in the middle of it or something. I don't have, I don't want to destroy everything, but I maybe enhance it so that people can see it's the strongest result.
Sure. So you're suggesting,
Put a dollar sign in the middle of the green.
okay, that's can do. I'll put that on the, we have a. So I hadn't even thought of color blindness. I apologize. Didn't occur to me.
Preferably not. It should be a sterling sign. Guys, don't keep
by the way,
around.
Andy.
Don't keep messing around. You might have
He wants
a great report. You don't have to do anything with it, but I've got to change the dollars into pounds.
Currency, changing the currency, Andy, is being built into the dashboard. That's because the UK, the UK market is interesting. We're not putting any rubles. Sorry. So, but the ability to use the sterling sign and the euro. Anyway. Okay. But the calculations, the calculations for the grid are all based on US and some Canadian transactions. Okay. You're nuts. You got to focus on a market, and this, I apologize, Andy, is the market on which we're focused.
Yeah, no, that's okay, George.
Thank you, sir. But we can play the tool allows us to to do the initial survey. Now imagine that we're on the report, and our client is asking us, well, what happens if? Or you can prompt them and say, well, do you want to see what impact it has if we, let's say, over the next year we implement best practices in only in the first dimension. Let's look at the impact that would have on your business. And let's just say that this business is really committed to getting it done. And they're just in the first dimension, right? That's these 8. It's the beauty of having them by dimension, right? The next 8 are dimension 2, and the last are dimension 3. I click next, next, next. And okay, so now we're a 75 here. Well, here, Madam Business Owner, you've had some impact, because doing all of that work does have an impact on transferable value. So we're now a 75.27. So at a 75, we're up in here. Now, your 27, that's still a problem if you're going to go to monetize. But in terms of the business looking good from a growth capacity perspective, you're doing the work. Okay. You're doing the work. So, you know, at least you're getting into the range of, we're at a 27 value capacity, but a high growth. You know, we're getting into an argument for the bottom end of the range of multiples. The problem is, for this business, they don't have a, you know, we can go back and look at these in turn. But if you think about monetizing a business, of transferring the value through M&A or some other mechanism, you need to have a document a lender or an investor could read to get a complete understanding of the business. You have to have reports that could easily be audited or used to support, and it should say and used to support M&A, right? They have to be highly credible. You have to be absolutely confident that you got your act together on your intellectual property, your contracts, your governance, and litigation. No getting around it. You have to be able to, if you can prove that you have high growth compared to the market, this one we might be able to say, okay, partly true, but you know, there are things we can get away with a little bit, but we still, to pass the sniff test, you know, we might be partly true on large market share, but we have to have a good spread of customers, Andy. It's Andy's word. He called me. It's like spread of customers. And there it is. Being able to defend your market. Let's build a moat around the business and have a strong brand, a brand that's a strategic asset. Well, what impact does that have on our ability to monetize the business? And oh, ladies and gentlemen, wow, we got our financials audited. We built the moat around the business. You know, if you think about telling it as a story, so the story is, this is a business that has, you know, that an outsider can easily understand. Their financials are highly credible. They're not going to get burned. They're not going to burn. This is the bridge you cannot burn at the deal table. There are no you know, goblins under the bed. They're growing at least as fast as their peers. They've got significant market share. They got tons of customers. If a few leave, we don't, you know, if there's friction in the transfer, we don't care. You know, we have enough customers to weather that. They've got some great, they have patents. It costs a ton of money to get into this business. They have some guru that you can't be able to replace. And you know, they've taken the time to build a brand that's linked to their culture, a brand that means something in the market that allows them to charge a premium, and therefore their margins are higher. You know, but you know, now we're talking. Now we're getting up into the, okay, you're in the, we can make an argument for a $10 million value, not $6. It's $4 million, not inconsequential. So we can use this to have a much more dynamic conversation to have the dynamic conversation that we want to have. Does that make sense? David is holding his head.
Oh, I got a headache. Sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry, man. I thought I was giving you the headache.
No, definitely not.
So, yeah.
George, I have a question. So is there a type of company that's just too small to run this? Like, you know, I always kind of in my mind, you know, I've got like, you know, Main Street businesses. I always kind of think of that 1 to 5 range, where they're kind of like a little bit of a hybrid between lower middle market and Main Street. And then, you know, 5 and above, usually you start to take on more characteristics of, you know, lower middle market and middle market. So I'm kind of curious, is there a type of company where it's just like the way too small for something like this to be useful?
I don't think so. I don't think so, David. I think, you know, for purposes of having this conversation, there's no such thing as too small. And if they're interested in doing the work and laying the foundation for a business that's prepared to grow and then scale, then this is work, you know, love to see them doing it at $1 million or less. The other interesting part of the conversation is Is this, so guys, tell me that if you've seen this, right? $12 million company with $200,000 in reported profit. Why would that be? Now think about having this conversation. This business, we would assume, that we would assume has somewhere on the order of, $1 million or more of EBITDA, looking from the outside. But they're showing up, and on their tax returns, it says $200,000. Why is that? Well, because the $124,000 car and the beach house and the trips that aren't really business, and they're paying their kids' tuition out of the business, and. But they've got $200,000 here. It's like, that's what's on your tax return. Okay, well, let me show you something. Let me show you what that's done. Here's a business, because they're paying tax gains. Imagine, well, here's the impact that that's had on the value, because it's the EBITDA. They're sitting there saying, I have a $12 million business. What do you mean? It's like, listen, my friend, that is not the valuation. You're going to get interest at 12 million, but the way you're cooking your books, tough term, the way you're keeping your books, the decisions you're making have this impact on the value of your business. So if we had if your books were normalized, and we're seeing the profit that, let's just say 10%, here's what that will have, the impact this will have on your business. Oh, how do you like me now? Okay, it's a profound impact. You need to peel your lifestyle. What would you pay someone to do your job? Period. And what is being run through the company books that an outsider wouldn't. And this is normalizing. These are the add backs, right? So anyhow, I'm doing it on the fly, but imagine you're having a preliminary conversation, or you're just starting the engagement, and this is the conversation you're having with your client, and have that light bulb go off.
George, in that discussion, would you talk about normalizing and what, because the number net profit, that you're assuming that's the tax return.
Exactly right. Yeah.
But in reality, normalizing is could be a complicated question in an M&A transaction.
Absolutely, Barry. And when you're a very experienced exit planner, you've been through transactions, you've had these conversations. So can you play that out?
Well, I mean, you brought up a lot of the questions. If personal expenses are going through the business, it's always a discussion to add those back. But then also, you made a statement about what it takes to replace the owners in the business.
Yes.
I mean, I'm going through this now and we're having a discussion over, what that cost is to replace the owners. But it depends on your buyer and a number of different things. Absolutely.
Well, it's good having that discussion on normalization earlier than later, because it tends to be something. But the reality is it's beneficial, because if you can do it early, they can clean up their, it's part of cleaning up their financials, right? Like, and so instead of having a million adjustments, during a transaction, where the reality is like, if you have a lot of adjustments, that maybe you don't get full credit for them. Whereas if you're like, say, 3 years away, and you start cleaning up your balance sheet, and you stop running through some of that stuff that like some of those personal expenses, you can probably make a good argument you're actually going to realize some of that additional value because of that.
And the longer we have, the longer the track record of this number being on the tax return in terms of an M&A to another, M&A is just one of the options, right? One of 6 different ways to lose your lover. That was a joke. But the longer the history of having clean books, the better, right?
For sure.
Now, if the client says, I don't want, there are a number of different reasons for which the client doesn't want to sell the business. And that's okay. Because if they say, I never want to sell it, I may want to stop being the day-to-day operator and be the CEO. I might then want to back up a step and be the chairman and hire a CEO, but I'm going to continue to take, this $1 million, I'm going to continue to take that out of the business and keep the number low. That's fine. That is a way to build personal wealth. And that is fine and good. It is, in fact, their company and their asset. But then we can turn and say, all right, well, let's talk about the things that need to be in place. If you want if that is your plan, that is your quote unquote exit, that's how you're going to convert your life's work into wealth. And here, this is an exit planning conversation, maybe not a typical growth engagement conversation, but what do we need to do? And we need to, this is Act 1, Scene 1 in the Strategic Growth Project Plan, right? This is the place where we focus fast. This, Jeff, I know you can speak to this. This is the job. So.
Well, it's also interesting, George, because you could show the effect, the economic effect of owner dependence.
That's that's absolutely.
I mean, you're subtracting it from one area, what it costs to replace them, and you're adding it back here. So it'd be interesting to see what that effect is.
Absolutely. And go ahead, Andy.
And I guess also you could also begin from our point of view to look at ROI, because by just altering one driver at a time and seeing the effect, you could say, okay, well, in terms of working on just this one particular driver, it's going to add this amount, and it opens up a conversation to attach a monetary amount to each growth driver, I guess. George, am I thinking? You are,
and there are two philosophies when it comes to applying value to each of the 24 growth driving objectives. Another term you'll see throughout the book. Thank you, Andy. Andy takes me to task, guys. Every once in a while, he's like, "What are you doing?" And so if we think about there are two, we can assign values. So this business, we're going to go back to the report and say that they have what did I do? Oh, I know what I did. I changed a number. There we go. You gotta click submit. So we have a value gap here, let's say of, here's essentially $4 million of gap between these two numbers. And let's just, for simplicity's sake, say that's our value gap. Now you can divide that value gap, that $4 million by 24 and say, okay, well, every time we fix one of these, because the assumption is you need to get them all up, right? So do we divide it by 24? And the other philosophy, and I have the scoring written up, is to divide them on a weighted basis. And that's a philosophy conversation. Now, Andy, something you just said caused me to think, and I'm just going to tease this out here. When we think in terms of then engaging this client and saying, okay, well, we're going to work on, let's say that you have a $2 million gap, then you have the difference between the multiple you can get today and the multiple that your business could be worth is $2 million. Nobody needs a barking dog in the background. Sorry, guys. I know it happens every week. Let's start working with this client, and we're going to work on 2 objectives per quarter. Here we're going to work with the CFO and the president or COO. And how does that play out? Well, if we're going to do this over a quarter has 12 weeks, give or take. And there are an average of 6 key results for each growth driving objective. And so if we're going to work on financial reporting processes, we can spend 2 weeks on each of these key results, getting them in place sequentially, and move the business forward. So this starts breaking the 24 growth driving objectives down into intelligible, manageable sprints, and helping them install an effective system for running the business. And and when we use the analyze, design, execute cycle, we have our analysis that is informed that we need to do this work, because typically we'll find that there's no business is perfect. There's no such thing as 100% business. That there's going to be some work to do, and if they're having to be strong in a key result, then we can accelerate work on the next one, or take a breather, whatever. But so,
George, can you go back to your table at the top? Go back to what you were just discussing in terms of the objectives per quarter. Now, I have a question, and I have a little bit of trouble with this too, in the sense that, and I know it's indicative, of course it is. It's a discussion and conversation, but working on 2 objectives per quarter, that's tough, because with each objective you've got the key results. With each set of key results, you've got a series of actions and to-dos, and you've got the whirlwind going on.
yes,
And that's a really tough schedule to meet with a client. I guess each client is different, but it's just something to be aware of in terms of that's a conversation starter, because certainly with the clients I'm working, they'd not keep up with that schedule for sure. It's too ambitious for them, based on the premise less is more.
Okay, I agree with that. And so it could be that we say, right, we're going to work on one, and this goes into design, and knowing the client, having worked with the client, understanding what their appetite is, if you will, for doing this work. And if we were simply going to work on these 1 per quarter, fantastic. Then we'll build the plan accordingly. Now, if we're working on 1 per quarter, can we complete one in less than a quarter? Those all become question. This is why I describe it as guardrails on the highway. We have a high, it's not like a train track where we got to go in one direction. This needs to be dynamic, precisely, Andy, for that reason. A larger company, perhaps with a slightly more sophisticated senior leadership team, might be able to tackle 2 of these, because they're between 2 different. They're assigned. The accountability is assigned to 2 different senior leaders. In a smaller company where there's maybe the senior leadership team isn't as mature, they don't have quite the level of expertise, then tackling them 1 at a time could be a great way. Perhaps as we do the work, they become able to tackle 2 at a time. But Andy, you're right, coming out of the gate, especially since we want to create some early successes, right? Now, all of this is then captured in the flash report. So if we're just running 1, I would simply hide. I would delete this if I was implementing a flash report with a client. And this is a first pass, right? What are we going to track as a first pass? But where are we in each of these? And there are definite, these are quantified definitions of what green, red, yellow, and red are. So, Andy, that it comes down to on a case by basis, and that's up to you as the advisor. And guys, that's one of the strengths of having a community, is to come back and say, hey, here's what I'm thinking about doing with a client. We can put it through a murder, what's called a murder board. Let's talk about this and see if I'm on the right track, or if I'm setting up for disaster. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
George, if we go back to your execution management system, will this be integrated into Clarity, or is this a separate system or tracking mechanism that's in Circle?
this will be released into Circle. It'll be available to members, and it will be in Clarity Level 2. The deep analysis will generate this and in a dynamic way where, you know, there are other systems that are a railroad track. You're going to do this, then you're going to do the next, then you're going to do the next. And that's good guidance, but it doesn't, to Andy's point, it doesn't really reflect the real, you know, it doesn't apply as dynamically to the real world.
Okay.
So,
All right. And then my second question is, how, you know, one of the things we talked about in Charleston is ownership or leadership. The CEO has the ability to work on areas that they want to. How does the execution management system get, or components of it get emphasized, communicated to the CEO or owner, and then alignment is reached on what should be focused on or moved forward with next? Because I could see owners I've served in the past kind of scratching their head and thinking, yeah, well, I think we're good here, when they're really not. And, you know, I think we're weak here, so let's start where we're weakest. Where they really need to start is on the other end. How is that all agreed upon?
So that's a great question, Jeff. And if we had another hour, but we should talk through that, because what we're really talking about there is getting we need to reach consensus among the senior leadership team, if there is one, as to where the company really is today. And so if you have a company that has just one strong leader, and then they have they don't really have an effective senior leadership team, then okay, the deep analysis will starts putting some, you know, calls them out. They can't hide from, they can't just say, well, I think it's great and therefore it is. You know, you're calling them out. You're saying, okay, well, do you have, and we can go back, you know, if you look at, we can go back and look at the key results and say, okay, well, do you have, you know, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6? No. Well, then you don't really, then you can't say that you're at this objective. And then we can train people up. We can bring in outside, you know, there's a, you know, how do we grow businesses? The key thing is to start with a consensus on the bedrock. And if there's a senior leadership team, you can use Clarity Level 1 with the CEO, and then anonymously also run it with their senior leaders, aggregate the results and say, right. And as we saw in Charleston, right? There are 5 people on the senior leadership team. 2 people think that the business is humming, and 3 people think it's at the bottom, not at all.
Okay.
Okay, let's talk through this.
Yes.
You know?
Yeah, I remember that now. We covered that.
Yeah.
And I see 3 questions that bubble up in your mind to think about, and those would be, you know, do you need rapid growth? Because that's going to open up a conversation in terms of prioritization. Bear in mind the need for quick wins because of the change management. That will raise a conversation in terms of the order of doing this. So these considerations we put in. There was a third that just went through my mind and shot through my mind. So rapid growth. Oh, and the other thing is, depending on the maturity of the management team, you may have to do 1 round of practice for the execution system. In other words, if you go use the execution system and start immediately implementing the objectives, you know, as the real system, if you like, then if it's a weak management team and they fail to achieve the key results at the end of the sprint, then what happens right at the very beginning of the program, you got that, you know, you've got that, oh, it doesn't work, you know, and all the things that come out. And so you may have to have a sort of little practice system of rocks and priorities over a period of time, so you can come back and fix the execution system. And it's normally going to be around accountability. No, we didn't get it done. We didn't get we don't have the metrics, although we have agreed them. So you iron out all those things in that less mature team, and so you might have a practice. So these are just 3 inputs that would go into the conversation that George just talked about.
Yeah, and let's we've gone over an hour, which is fantastic, but I know you guys are all busy. Andy, can I ask one question, and we'll use that to round out this week's coffee Klatsch, which is challenging the senior team to come back the following week with their data, the appropriate data for the flash report, a great way to start, saying, you guys should know your gross revenues, your net income, your margin, your net promoter score. I'm just using the ones that are on the flash report that we put out as a template. There's a great starting point. It will evolve into something that works for a particular business. Anyhow, Andy,
I love that scorecard, but in that workshopping around what we're going to do in the prioritization, there's going to have to be a follow-up workshop to begin to look at what is the scorecard, what are the 10 figures that you want to, and inevitably it's going to be wrong, but it doesn't matter, because it will be iterative as we go along, but it gives them something to work to. Then they quickly discover the following week, oh, we said that, but we don't have the data. Okay, let's fix that. And that didn't quite fit, and so on. And so there's this sort of, as I say, this practice, this rehearsal for the big thing,
And in many companies, this is a conversation they've never had before. The transparency, which is something the CEO must decide to implement, right? They got to get the cards, be like, okay, look at I only have two, I got a pair of deuces, or I got a full house, whatever it is. The transparency, and then when we start working with a flash report, and we've all lived this, when you start getting data and you start looking at it, you start wanting to improve the data, improve what the data is telling us, and it promotes collaboration. Absolutely. Not that it's easy, there is no bloody easy button, but it does, you get to trust the process, man. Trust the process.
And this is why I love this work, because you just raised that issue. To get to that transparency, you're back to trust. Mm-hmm. You're back to having productive conflict to get the moose on the table. And so you've got to work on that as well. And it's all interrelated.
Did that answer your question, Jeff?
Yes, and then some.
Okay, awesome. Hey guys, we've run a little over. Can we do just a quick key takeaway? I'll start with you, David.
I've got to run, but
you got to run. Okay,
no good job. That's my takeaway.
Okay, thanks, man. Jeff.
Yeah, I think it's not only what we just covered, but also having conversation around the best practices, deal killers, growth killers, etc. That can help to establish and build trust and help me serve my clients better.
Awesome. Thanks, man. Barry?
I like the the execution tool, because it really helps you organize, and it gives transparency to the owner, and it gets them to organize in their mind what's important and how we need to really attack it, and provides us some accountability for all parties moving forward. So I'm eager to see that when it's final, ready to go.
Well, you'll have it as an analog, what I call an analog tool, meaning it's not SaaS, very quickly. Okay, and then it'll be implemented into the software in the next period by May. Andy?
And that's when you do the quote unquote deep dive.
Yes. Yeah, because we can't. Yeah, when we do the deep dive, this will be one of the outputs. I'm so excited, guys. The progress we're making, I cannot be more excited. And it costs a ton of money, but this is
You know, I'm excited too, and all I can say is it's just wow, George, the work you're doing and how quickly you're doing it.
Thank you.
My takeaway is the strategic growth and strategic value table.
Great, awesome. All right, cool. And mine is that you guys, your positive feedback is, first of all, it fuels me, so thank you. And two, that we're clearly, you know, nobody has looked at Clarity and said, what have you done? It's a mess. There's a lot of value there. So I'm excited, and we're gonna keep pushing. Okay, guys, long Klatsch. This was great though. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jeff. I'll be
Thank
in
you.
touch.
Hey, sounds
I'll be
great.
in touch. And George, I'll set a calendar date. Okay.
Awesome. Thank you, guys.
Great to see you,
You and I
Barry.
need to talk as well. I know.
Nice
Yeah.
seeing you.
Yeah, thanks, George.
All right, man.
Thanks.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks.
Bye.